Welcome to Readara. Today we are talking about radical focus, achieving your most important goals with objectives and key results. The author of the book, Christina Wodtke. Welcome to Readara.
Thank you. It's terrific to be here.
Thank you. The book has some very fascinating things and insights to offer, especially to would-be entrepreneurs and people who are starting businesses. What is the central message of the book?
I think the central message of the book is that the world is full of interesting things that are out there to distract you. And if you really want to accomplish your dreams, you have to find a way to keep your goals right in front of you so that you can live them and make them happen. And I believe that one of the single most effective technologies to do that is objectives and key results. And so the book teaches people how to use objectives and key results in order to accomplish the things they want to accomplish.
What kind of challenges entrepreneurs or people who start a business face? You know, you have a history of working with people and know who have started business or managed businesses. What kind of distractions they generally fall into?
Oh my gosh, it's amazing how many different kinds of distractions will face you when you decide to start a company. I've been teaching entrepreneurship at California College of the Arts and at Stanford University for the last 4 years. And before that, I helped a lot of startups as well as being part of companies like LinkedIn and Zynga. And I will tell you that there are as many distractions as there are startup founders. You have problems like you don't have enough money or you have too much money that people will say, come talk to us, or you can't find anybody to talk to. You have problems with your employees. You can't hire effectively. I mean, to be honest, it's kind of shocking that anybody ever succeeds at all in this world, because having a startup is really, really, really hard, especially since to be an effective entrepreneur, it's really a team sport. You have the occasional, solo founders, and they're sort of mythological, but most of the time, companies are started by a product person, a technical person, and a business person. And when the three of you are working together as a team, you have to make sure that you hold the same vision for the company, that you're communicating effectively, that your time is spent on the things that have the highest value. I've seen companies split and collapse into arguments, into fights. They think they understand each other, but they're not communicating effectively. I really feel for entrepreneurs everywhere, because they really make our world better, but it is not an easy job to do.
What can be done to make it easy? How entrepreneurs can avoid some of the well-known traps or some of the difficulties that may be compounded by their own actions?
Well, there's a lot of things that are now understood. In a lot of ways, I feel jealous of today's entrepreneur. When I started my company, Christina Media, which was eventually bought by LinkedIn, there was nothing out there. Steve Blank had only just written 4 Steps to the Epiphany. The Lean Startup wasn't out yet. Alex Osterwalder had published his book. So we just kind of flung ourselves into the world and hoped for the best. And I remember when I finally came across Steve Blank's book, we'd been going at it for about a year, and I was so excited to read one of those core concepts, which was customer development, that I was like, we have to start doing this right away. And I talked to my co-founder. There were just 2 of us at that time, a technical co-founder, and I was doing the business and the product side. And I told him, customer development, this will tell us if we're building the right thing, which is unfortunate because we'd already launched our website. But we went out and we started doing sales calls. We started talking to people, and it became increasingly clear that the business model as we had envisioned it wasn't actually going to be viable. This is very painful. And I actually stalked Steve Blank. I looked around and I found a phone number listed for him on the Haas website because he taught at Haas Business School. And I called up thinking I would get his office or a voicemail or something. And a woman answered. She goes, Steve, I think it's one of your students. And I ended up calling him at home. But he was such a generous and kind man. He invited me out to his ranch, and we talked through the business model. And by the time we were done discussing, I realized that this was a business that I was either going to have to pivot significantly with or find a home for it. And I chose the latter because I felt like LinkedIn was going to be an amazing place to be. And luckily, that was a pretty good bet. But I will say that now when you look at things like those core concepts, customer development, pivoting, and then you look at the things the lean startup has led to us, which teaches us about validated learning, to come up with a hypothesis, to talk to our customers, to build on, to make sure that we really are building the right thing, that we understand the price point and the value proposition. Right now is a wonderful time, and I'm so glad that you guys provide a website like you do so that you can connect entrepreneurs with books like that. Now, I think OKRs are another piece of the puzzle. A lot of people think of them as a system to be used for mature companies, right? You're a big company and you want to control your employees, and so you do OKRs to set targets. But I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs use OKRs to say, to test a hypothesis. So you create an objective that is, we think that this, right? And here are the 3 metrics, which are your key results. These are the 3 metrics that would move if it was true. And then you spend 3 months chasing after that as hard as you can. And that way you're either validating the single most important learning about your value proposition, or you're invalidating it. You can do it on a slightly shorter cycle if you're an entrepreneur, maybe 1 month instead of 3 months. Although I think that if you're post-discovery phase and you're trying to actually validate a value proposition, 3 months is really what it takes to truly understand the problem. So I feel like I'm very lucky that I worked at some companies such as Zynga, where I got to learn about OKRs, and I've been able to share that through my book with young entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out how do we make sure we maintain the focus we need to be able to find product market fit before we run out of runway.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sometimes the software is the product or the service is your product, and then it may not be evident to you how it's going to be developed or where it will go. Like if you look at where Facebook was to start it out and where it ended up, and there are many similar situations. How can you help, how OKR can help you when you're in that situation?
You know, what's fascinating about those stories is, you know, Mark Zuckerberg could have just sat around on his bum thinking, I really got to think of the perfect thing that will be great for the world, you know, and he could have just spent all his time caught in analysis paralysis, thinking and thinking and thinking. But he built something and he put it out and he got information from his customers, his early customers, and it spread from school to school. And he came up with a hypothesis from the conversations he had with his end customers that there were more people that would find value in the service. And it's not like he woke up one day with today's Facebook perfectly visualized in his mind. He went out, he built something small, he learned from it, he built a little bit more. And I know that photos was an incredible inflection point. You know, when they started allowing people to do photo sharing, it caused the website to absolutely explode. And I think that that is the really hard work of being an entrepreneur, is that you can't tell a customer, here's a thing, would you like that? Because they always say, sure, you know, whatever they're picturing in their mind, it was full of candy canes and unicorns, and of course they like it. You have to actually build something that they can relate to, that they can try, and you have to constantly be doing research with them so that you can understand that relationship. And you start to see these little moments where they get excited about something, and you can build on that and build it on. Being an entrepreneur is a highly iterative process. And that's another thing I like about OKRs is it says our objective is to do this, and these are the results we like to see, but we don't tell you how. It's not like a roadmap or a pipe map where you get a good grade if you check off everything on your check marks list. Instead, it says, these are the results we'd like to see. Start experimenting, start playing, start trying out different things until you can find your way to success.
Very well said. Could you go a little bit deeper into explaining what is the framework for radical focus, and why, when you say radical focus, maybe if you can explain what that phrase means, how radical you can get, what can you do to get there and stay there, more important.
It's funny that you say that. I had a hilarious situation. A friend of mine who's a coach, an OKR coach, called me up and he said he was talking to a client and they said, are you certified in the radical focus process? I was like, oh, good. There's a process and a certificate. Nobody told me. I will say that it's not just OKRs for me. Radical Focus, the book, really talks about an approach to living your goals. So OKRs, as you may or may not know, are the child of Intel, right? Mm-hmm. So Andy Grove said he did management by objectives, which is this idea that if you tell people the results you want to see and you hire smart people, they will surprise you at how good they are at making results happen. And then John Doerr brought down OKRs, which is just sort of like a SMART goal. It's a more eloquent way of stating what that end goal looks like. What's really wonderful about OKRs is they are both qualitative and quantitative. The objective is aspirational and it's inspirational. It's something that you're like a mission for 3 months, right? I would like to own the content marketing business. I'd like to be the go-to site for nonfiction, But then you ask yourself the hard questions, the quantitative questions, which are the KRs. How would we know we were the go-to site? Would it be traffic? Would it be revenue? Would it be growth month over month? You have to find exactly the right numbers that take something fuzzy and good feeling and make it hard. Now, all the time I have CEOs phone me up. I use the service Clarity so that I can give ad hoc advice. And they'll say, can I just have an OKR of $5 million? Well, just because the CEO thinks that way, and maybe the salespeople think that way, it doesn't mean everybody in the company thinks that way. The designers or maybe the customer service people, some marketing people, they need a little inspiration. They need a reason to jump out of bed in the morning. And what's really good about an OKR is it has both sides of our brain, right? Our metric side and our more creative, dreamy side that want to be part of something special. So you've got a great goal. The problem with a great goal is we set it and we forget it. So people will spend 2 weeks figuring out the perfect OKRs. And then at the end of the quarter, they'll check to see if they got it, as if the OKR fairy came overnight to bring them the results, right? This is no way to get results. So I came up with the radical focus approach, which is about focusing on these goals and being willing to drop other things that don't really matter. So you'll see companies and they'll be like, we have 5 different OKRs, first of all, for this quarter. Well, let's think about that for a second. If we have one objective and 3 key results, that doesn't mean you have 5 OKRs. It means you have 15 things for people to remember. Well, let's say that the company has 5 OKRs that a department does. Now you have 30 things to remember. Oh, and an individual. Now you have 45, and so on. Nobody can hold that in your head. You need a tiny piece of information that every time you have to make a decision, where am I going to spend my time? You can immediately remember the company OKR and you can go to it. So I always insist that people have one OKR for their company and then maybe one for their team. Try not to boil the ocean. Try not to have 100 million goals. Don't do everything. Don't have an OKR around remembering to brush your teeth, Have an OKR only on the really big important things that maybe it wouldn't happen if you didn't focus on it. The second thing is you have to touch them over and over again like a lucky stone in your pocket. So every Monday you say, hey guys, these are our OKRs. Are we closer or farther away? What actions are you going to take towards them? This is straight out of Agile, right? It's a stand-up meeting. You're saying, this is our goal. What are you going to try to do to make it happen? Are there any risks? Are there any blockers? And then on Fridays, you say, hey, did we make them or not? Everybody gets to brag about something important and wonderful they did towards the company OKRs, and you celebrate together. And it gives you a feeling like you're part of something magical. You're part of a team that's wonderful. A team that celebrates together is a tighter knit, more effective team. The other thing is, if you don't have anything to brag about on Friday, that's a little embarrassing. You want to make sure you've done something towards the OKRs so that you can be part of this wonderful experience. And again, it's that radical focus. What are we doing every single week to move towards this visionary goal that we have set together? And you'll see in other companies and other methodologies, people will have 20 OKRs and they're tracking them in spreadsheets. And I don't care how good your software is. If you don't have that goal in your brain, I do not believe that you're living that goal. We're humans. We're squishy. We're soft. We're easily distracted. It's important to know what the most important thing is so that we can actually choose to do it.
There are emotional side and then there is a rational side. And the emotional side is of course, is people-based and it's team-driven. And how important it is to have the team first built and then working all together before you can set up the OKRs, because if you have the wrong people and if the communication is not good across the team, then you're not going to get what you expect.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked that. One of the most interesting things to me was after I put this book in the world, I'd get these phone calls and people would say, So if you can't use OKRs for performance reviews, how do you do performance reviews? And I was like, how do you do them now? I had no idea that a lot of people, despite there being a lot of really great books out there, a lot of people aren't comfortable giving strong feedback, evaluating teammates, assembling teams. There's a lot of struggle in the soft squishy side, exactly what you were talking about. So my next book that I'm working on right now, I'm doing NaNoWriMo. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not.
So NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month, and it's done all over the world, hundreds and hundreds of people. And I've been so busy, I kept putting off writing this book about effective teams and effective teamwork. And so I finally just signed up to do it, and I'm writing 1,667 words a day in order to write a 50,000 word book about it by the end of the month. So hopefully, maybe by this time next year, worst case scenario, there'll be a book on this about the importance of working on the soft skills side. But you're right. If you can't talk clearly and openly to your team, if you can't fire people, if you don't know how to hire effectively, and most important, if you can't give feedback, you won't have an effective team. The OKR is just one piece of the puzzle. You could say to this team, here's your goal, but you can't make it if the team doesn't know how to work together. I am constantly amazed at how bad people are at even giving each other the gentlest and simplest feedback. For example, as I said, I teach these entrepreneurship classes, and the students work in teams. And of course they work in teams because that's how we work for the rest of our life, right? We're always going to work with other people. There's very little you can accomplish by yourself. And they will be so frustrated with each other. Maybe somebody doesn't get the work done on time, or somebody else is perpetually late, or somebody never prepares for a presentation. And I'm sure you recognize these problems. These are problems we run into with our coworkers all the time. And they come to me and want me to fix it. And I'm like, have you talked to them? And they say, no. I'm afraid they're going to hate me. And I'm like, why would they hate you? If you simply say, when you're late, we lose time and it's really hard to keep up with our work. And what I found is there's a model of feedback that comes out of the Harvard negotiation project, and it's also used at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, where I have a lot of friends who teach. And it's really simple. It's simply mention observed behavior. I see that this thing is happening. Mention how you feel about it. It's upsetting. And talk about the consequences and ask for change. The consequences is we can't get the work on time, and I'd like to ask you to start showing up at the time we agree to meet so that we can be more effective. And this very, very simple model for feedback keeps it from being you're a jerk or you're mean. You're not telling people that they're bad people. You're simply saying this behavior is making us hard to be effective as a team, and I'd like to invite you to change. And my students use it, and they start communicating, and they start performing. And it's so tiny, it's such a tiny change, and yet it's a change that makes all the difference in the world. So goal setting is important, but communicating around that goal and holding each other accountable and asking each other to be as amazing as I believe that everybody can be, these are also really critical parts of success.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Maybe if you can give us some basic fundamentals that drive OKRs, and then how OKRs could be used for product teams. Let's say when you're setting goals, do you want to invite everybody in participation, or you want to set the goals and push them down?
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not going to work, obviously. But are there, these are simple things, and they become my goals and your execution, and we both fight against each other. What I'm saying is there a process that could welcome the goal setting and marry it with execution, so that way, in the end, everybody is happy along the journey, not at the last minute?
Oh, it's funny that you said that you can't push it down. Of course, that's not going to work because, believe me, a lot of people think that that's exactly how it should work and that will work fine. And it always ends badly. So the thing about OKRs is that everybody has to buy in. And so what you'll see a company that says, we're going to do it, and all the managers will set OKRs for everybody. And so there'll be the company one and the department one and the team one and the individual ones, and everybody's setting it for everybody else. But there's no buy-in. right? Because you were just given this goal that you're supposed to live up to now, and maybe you understand why, maybe you don't understand why that's the goal. The companies that I've seen that are much more effective about it is they start a little slower. Either they do just the company level first, or they start with a couple of pilot teams. And the pilot teams is the single most effective process. But even when you're doing the pilot teams, you don't do it from the top down. What you want to do is solicit from everybody, what do you think our objective should be for this quarter or for this year, depending. And everybody will put it in. And it's amazing what people will come up with. You know, your employees know the problems. They live it every day. They often have amazing insights into what should be dealt with. And then the leadership team can collect those together and look for patterns and look at what they're planning and come up with an objective. And then you send it back again and you say, okay, guys, let's think of what are all the ways we can measure. And this is one of my favorite exercises to do when I work with teams is I'll say, think of every single metric, write down as many as you can, go wacky, you know, NPS, employee surveys, every single way that we might know that things were doing well. If you were thinking about your website, you might say things like, how many people are blogging about us? Where are we on Google PageRank? You could think of tons of different metrics. And then you stack rank them and you decide, as a leadership team, what do you think the top 3 KRs are? And they have to be something you can actually measure. For example, I was working just with a team recently and they were worried about, the effectiveness of their meetings and they wanted to measure, how many people came to the meetings. And I thought, are you really going to take attendance? Really? Is this something you're comfortable measuring? And it was also a little bit in the weeds. So I think one of the questions you have to ask yourself is this a metric we can actually collect? Is this a metric that's actually telling? Is it a metric that matters? I think Alistair Kroll in his book, Lean Analytics, talks about only paying attention to the metrics that really, really matter. And I think that narrowing down a focus, and you notice it just keeps coming back to focus over and over again. Let's not measure everything on the planet. Maybe once a quarter or something, we can do a big metrics review. But instead, let's just closely watch the ones that are really telling. And so collectively as you team, you decide which metrics will be the ones that will tell you whether or not you're succeeding. And that way, even though it's not consensus, you're not voting on it, the leadership team still makes the final call. Everybody's been heard, everybody's had input, and it's an OKR that everybody hopefully can live with, if not actually believe in. And hopefully they believe in it as well. So once you have this, and this shouldn't be a long process. It should be really just like maybe a couple of half days, a couple of surveys, a couple of half days. It shouldn't be a long, drawn out 2-week process. I heard this horrifying story about a very large company that literally took a month to get all the OKRs okayed, at which point all the OKRs were wrong because an OKR takes 3 months to work on and they'd already lost a month just in approval process. So it's important to time box this so you can be effective. And then, once they've been set up, you, build them into everything. I recommend building them into your weekly status message. You know, when you're writing a weekly status, you put your OKR at the very top. You say what your confidence level is. Do we think we're closer or farther away from making it? And then what are just a handful of priorities that you're doing this week towards it? The OKR has to be absolutely everywhere.
When the solar light or sunlight is focused, it becomes solar energy. And when people's energy are focused, they create products and profits. So focus is... And
when it's really focused, it's a laser.
It's a laser, yes. And laser focus is what I was about to say, actually, is that when you have a laser focus, you have a best use of your energy and time. And the Japanese or Asian way of doing things is participate, and the decision-making may be slower, but then the execution moves much faster, whereas we sometimes make decisions quick and we not always get the execution right here.
Wow, yeah. I've seen it when they try to put the OKRs from the top down, and the company literally rejects it. It's like an organism spitting out an alien object. It doesn't work.
Yeah, almost becomes like allergy at that point.
Yeah.
And the
an irritant.
Yes, exactly. Now, would you give 1 or 2 examples, or maybe just one example that kind of illustrates that how, as you say very well in the book is very tightly written and it's very conversational, but it uses the tea example. You know, somebody liked the tea and now they want to build a business out of tea, but it doesn't always work out that way. But if it does, if you want to make it work out, that tea is a profitable business. There are three things that tea is a product. Business is an operations and systems, and profit meaning is the final result. So you, in that those three words, you lay out a lot of things. Do you want to give any example of something that how a team that was, or a startup that was plumbing had no idea, and how they turned the dream into an execution?
It's really funny. I'm working with a company, and I don't have permission to talk about them, so I'm going to be careful and try to keep them anonymous. But they reached out to me because they offered a service, and they had this insane range of customers, everything from somebody as big as Disney to a little guy who was doing his own thing. And they had this huge range of customers, and they tried to do OKRs, and they had the story I was telling you, like 5 OKRs at each level, and the company rebelled. Like, they hated it so much. And they were a relatively small company. I think at the time they were about 45 people, remote, most of them remote. And the company just hated it. They had picked up the process from, I think, from the Google Rework site or something, and they tried to do it exactly the way Google does it. And Google is a really fascinating company because it's a company of engineers and people who are very metrics driven, and they'll carefully measure everything, and they'll grade every OKR like 0.63% completed or what have you. And this little company, they hated it. It didn't match their company culture at all. And so they reached out to us, and they, reached out to me actually and said, we'd kind of like to give it another go. We read your book. We like it. Can you give us any advice? And I had to be honest, as much as I'm being fierce and saying only one OKR and do things this way, I said, you got to make it your own. It's got to fit into your culture. So they started out, doing OKRs like Radical Focus. They did just pick only one, which did work out extremely well from them. And they only did it for the company. They didn't do it for any other level. But they found out little things like, it was really hard because they were spread out so far that they couldn't really celebrate. They would get on Skype and like try to tap a soda pop or a tea, depending on what hour it was, to congratulate each other. But what they found worked out really well for them, instead of trying to do a more formal celebration, was having a celebration channel on Slack. And that ended up replacing it, so that there was literally a channel on Slack that's just them bragging about things they've done to move towards their OKRs. So they started tweaking it, and they kept all the core concepts, the concept of focus on what really matters, the concept of commit to your team publicly, and the concept of celebration. But they made it fit into their cultural way of working. And they are still using OKRs, and their numbers are hockey sticking. They're doing extremely, extremely well. So I think for me, the really big lesson is don't be dogmatic. Don't say it absolutely every Monday at 10 a.m. we all have to get together and we have to use the Foursquare and we have to, only have 3 P1s. Make it work for you. Try it the way it is in the book, and then iterate. Just like Lean Startup, you have to run a hypothesis, you have to observe what occurs, and you have to make it your own. I think the companies that I've worked with that have been most successful with OKRs are the ones that have made it make sense for themselves. And I've talked to companies that are doing all kinds of crazy things. I was talking to a CEO of a fast food chain who's using OKRs, and he's just doing it in Trello. And everybody lives in Trello, and it's really comfortable for them to run their results that way. And if he'd asked me, should I use Trello? I'd be like, are you insane? But, it's who you are as a company. It's where people are comfortable, and you have to find your own path to making it work. I still am going to insist on focus on fewer things, commit regularly, check in regularly, celebrate your wins. But other than that, go to town, make it your own.
Very well said. It has to mesh and fit within the culture, and also it has to be measurable and fit in your brain, which most people have peanut size,
Yeah, we're humans, right?
Exactly.
That part doesn't vary that much.
So much for the book and so much about the topic. And tell us a little bit more about you as a background, and how did you come to write a book, and how did you come to fall in love with OKR and then now evangelize it and advise people on it?
It's a funny thing. So So it's always complicated to talk about my life. About 3-4 years ago, I was a general manager at Zynga. And I'll be honest, I got burned out. It's a really tough life. It's a very intense life. I went through the Zynga IPO. I'd been at MySpace before that. I'd been at LinkedIn before that. I've been an internet executive for a while. I've started, a couple of companies, 2-3 companies, a couple of consulting companies, a couple of product companies, a nonprofit. And I had written a book in 2000 about information architecture. I actually have a design background and I started as a designer. But then after that, I was just too busy. And when I left Zynga, I was tired and I relaxed for a while and I watched some food TV and I laid around and I traveled through Thailand and I started thinking, I don't want to go back to working for somebody, but on the other hand, I need some structure to my life. And we'd used OKRs at Zynga. And I thought, well, what if I use OKRs? What if I set up quarterly OKRs actually for my life? And I did things like what I was just saying at the very beginning of this conversation, where I created a hypothesis. Maybe I would like to teach. What's the smallest thing I could do to find out if I like teaching? Well, instead of going off and getting a PhD or something, I simply got work at a local startup called General Assembly. And I helped shape their user experience design syllabus. It was their first design syllabus. And I found out I liked teaching, but I didn't really like the intensive. I didn't want to do my entire life. So I came up with another hypothesis. And then I lived it using OKRs. And now I've found this really sweet spot where I really love writing and I love telling stories. I love speaking. I do the occasional training and I really love teaching. I've got to say undergrads are my favorite people. There's something about that moment in your life when you're 19, 20, 21, you're out on your own, you're figuring out who you're going to be and what you're actually good at. And as a professor, I can give people tools that help them become their best self. And it's magical for me. So everything I do, whether it be writing, speaking, or teaching, it's all about helping people move towards their goals. I'm not here to tell anybody what your goals are. I'm just here to help you make them realities. And it's a terrific life. I could not be happier.
So you're doing teaching and speaking and obviously consulting and writing books. And
yeah.
Are you planning to write more books, or are there any other topics that you think you would explore or you might find more fascinating?
Oh my gosh, my backlog of books is out of control. I have so many things to say. So right now I'm finished with the first draft of a book on product market fit and how to get to product market fit. It came out of the class because I've been teaching it for about 4 years now, teaching entrepreneurship. And I realized there's not enough about really understanding your market, figuring out where a good place to start is before you even start writing code, and then trying to really understand the value proposition and the revenue model as a sensible whole. So I'm very excited because obviously as a teacher, I read so many books trying to find the right material. And I finally came to the point where I'm like, I think I'm going to have to write this book. So that one, the first draft is done, and I'll be looking at a second draft, and hopefully it'll be out in the spring. And then, as I mentioned, I'm doing NaNoWriMo to talk about how to hire, fire, and give feedback. And that's the one I'm starting a first draft on while the other one cools off. So I've got at least 2 more books planning to be released to the marketplace over the next 2 years. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I like writing.
You like writing and enjoy it, yeah. And you do very well, so that's good.
Oh, thank you.
When you wrote this book, what kind of hurdles, process hurdles or kind of starting from the concept to the completion, what you had to go through so the other authors can maybe learn something from you that you could shed some light on it, that they could do it better or differently?
I would love to share this story because I think it is a hilarious story. So, but it's an important story. So we picture books being written like somebody goes off in their attic and they type it all out and then they send it to their editor and it gets published. And, that's not my background. I'm a lean startup person. I've been in tech for a long time. I really treat my books like products. So what happened in this case is I thought, I want to write a book about OKRs. People really like my blog posts about OKRs. Maybe I should write a book. and I put in a proposal to South by Southwest. And I said, I'd like to give this talk on OKRs. It's based on my upcoming book. And they wrote back and they said, well, we don't have any speaking slots, but you can have a book reading slot. And this was about 4 or 5 months before the conference. And I said yes. And then I thought I'd better write this damn book. And so I quickly wrote a 75-page, I'd like to call it a minimal viable product. It was called The Executioner's Tale. I had 100 copies printed. I signed and numbered them. I sold them at South by Southwest, and I sold about maybe a third of them there. And then the rest I sold over the internet. And what was interesting is I didn't tell people what the price was. I would just have them contact me about, do you want to buy my book? And then I would tell them how much it cost. And I was able to move the price up and down until I could find the correct pricing for the book. So I actually used the startup process to price my book. And then I wrote to all of them and I asked them what they liked and didn't like about the book. I promised them they would all get copies of the second edition when it was done so that I would, value their feedback. But I found out a lot of surprising things. The number one piece of feedback I got that surprised me was that people loved it was a short book. Now, I thought I was going to have to write a 100 and 150-page book to provide value, right? That's what my last book had been. But it turned out that people really loved that they could sit down and read it fairly quickly and get the core concepts. And so I decided that when I filled it out, and I added the information that was necessary, I wouldn't do any filler whatsoever. I'd try to make sure that it was as concise as possible. I wanted you to be able to read it on a flight between, say, San Francisco and Seattle, and people will write to me and they go, oh my God, I loved it. I couldn't put it down. I read it in a weekend. And, a thicker book doesn't mean a book with more knowledge. So that's one of the things I did. The other thing I felt really strongly about was to write a fictional case study. Now, the story of Jack and Hannah that's in Radical Focus, it's actually based on startups that I've worked with. I kind of combined them and added some personality stories so that it's not based on just one story because then somebody would come yell at me. But I feel like business books can be like taking a bitter pill sometimes, right? And I wanted people to have fun reading it. I wanted them to actually enjoy, and I wanted them to have an emotional connection with these characters so that they could learn, but they could also enjoy it while they were learning. I mean, I worked at game design companies. Of course, I believe in having fun while you're learning. And so that was another piece that was really important to me is it had to be a book you enjoyed reading. And I know that sounds funny, but think about how many books that are super valuable, that are super unpleasant to read. There's way too many of them. So that was another thing that I felt very strongly about. And that's another thing I've gotten really great feedback about. Somebody came up to me at the Lean Startup Conference and she was like, oh my God, that engineer, he's terrible. He's a terrible person. And I'm just thinking to myself, I made him up. I love that you care so much about these characters. That's the best thing an author could possibly hear is that I was able to make characters that you really believed in and you cared about. And I snuck in a couple other messages other than OKRs. I think, you've read it, there's a lot of other messages about the importance of not putting off hard conversations, about facing difficult people and pointing out when they're not stepping up and doing what they need to do. I tried to address a few other, I think, classic issues that startups run into because you can't ignore them. So it was a wonderful experience. I think, people don't know that Eric Ries's Lean Startup, he started as a blog and he did talks. And then when he had the very first startup conference, his first Lean Startup conference, he took all his blog posts and he had a service that turns blog posts into a book and he just spat it out. And it was like a 2-inch thick book that was nothing but his blog posts. And he sold that. And from the feedback, he made the Lean Startup book that's the bestseller now. Alex Osterwalder, he came up with his thesis. He had a group of people giving him feedback. He self-published. He learned from that. He made a better book. I think it's time for us to realize that books are like everything else. They aren't born like Athena out of Zeus's skull, perfect in every way. It's something that you have to build a rough. You have to talk to your customers. You have to learn, and then you can make something that can reach a lot more people and be a lot better product that will connect.
Yeah, most authors don't have an iterative process, and most books don't have the customer feedback for the next version. They just move on to the next book. You know?
I think a book's like everything else. I mean, obviously there are choices I made that are my choices. Like I put pictures in there. I don't think there's any publisher that would let me put drawings in there, but it was something that I made, you know, as an artist. On the other hand, I'm also a business person, and I made sure that the book made sense and that people understood it and they enjoyed it. So you have to find that sweet spot between your gut instinct and customer feedback. But that's true for everything, whether it's a game or a software product or a book.
We've been speaking with Christina Wodtke, the author of Radical Focus, Achieving Your Most Important Goals with Objectives and Key Results. Thank you for your time and your comments. Really enjoyable. I hope a lot of people will benefit from it. And please do keep us in mind when you have your next book.
Of course. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you.